Back in 2008, Treyarch created a secret mode that no one expected to blow up. Activision especially. It had players facing off against waves of the undead, along with an ever-growing story that would continue to blossom for over 10 years, and even a new story now taking its place. But what of those other stories that came to be? Ones that weren't done by Treyarch's hands. Stories that never got their time to shine, or a second chance. So let's look back into the destroyed multiverse, and take a peek at some worlds that have gone forgotten. Starting with Call of Duty Ghosts Extinction. 300 million years ago, a species known today as the Cryptids dominated their native planet, led by a dominant variant of Cryptid classified as the Ancestors. The Ancestors' extreme intelligence and other powerful abilities caused these smaller cryptids to fear and worship them, ultimately being controlled like a hive mind. The planet was barren, volcanic, and the skies were dark, and one day this planet was to be ravaged by an incoming comet, causing global annihilation. Prior to the comet's arrival, the Ancestors constructed a series of structures beneath the surface, referred to as arcs. These fortified structures were designed to protect the inhabitants from apocalyptic events. To compound this effort, powerful protectors of these arcs were created, with only one being known: the Kraken. The Ancestors rested within sleeping chambers inside of these arcs, while the rest of the cryptid species began cultivating the interior of the planet, recreating their homeworld beneath the surface. One such plant they cultivated was the hive, a flora that thrived off of geothermal heat instead of sunlight, and stimulated the cryptid's cold-blooded metabolisms. The rapid regeneration made the hive nearly indestructible. The comet eventually made its impact, ending all life on a global scale. Millions and millions of years passed, and rising from the ashes of destruction was humanity. Evolving through history and becoming the new dominant species, and the planet the cryptids once conquered became known as Earth. Even though the cryptids were buried beneath the surface and their history was entirely unknown, this did not stop their influence on the human race. The Ancestors telepathically contacted select humans across the planet and across history, providing them with their secrets and knowledge, and further having them carry out their desires so that one day the cryptids could return to the surface and reclaim the Earth. However, it wasn't until the year 2005, during the Tel Aviv War, that the cryptids' existence remained a relative secret. Stationed in Pakistan and denied in exfil, SAS soldier David Archer and his squad were left for dead for 6 weeks, hiding out in a series of caves. Within these caves is where Archer first encountered the cryptids. What happens next is not known, and I assume Archer fought off against whatever cryptids he saw. Regardless, this incident seemingly broke his mind, realizing there is some unknown evil beneath the planet and no one in the world is willing to believe him. When he returned home, he underwent a psych eval, explaining what he saw during his 6 weeks in Pakistan. The psychiatrist grinned mockingly to Archer's claim of aliens hiding out beneath the surface. Agitated, Archer grows violent and attempts to strangle the psychiatrist. Guards enter the room and quickly render Archer unconscious. He was discharged from the military service soon after that, declared to be no longer fit for the line of duty. But this didn't stop Archer from trying to pursue the cryptids and uncover their origins. He knows what he saw. He didn't lose his mind from isolation, trauma, or survival instincts. He saw something the world was not meant to see, and now he needed answers. Creating a research organization called Nightfall, placing a research site in Alaska and a dig site in Mexico, and then hiring dozens of brilliant minds from across the world. The Nightfall program was to uncover the truth behind the aliens' origins, what's commanding them, and what their plans for humanity are, if it wasn't obvious to him already. Meanwhile, Dr. Samantha Cross, who is currently attending Harvard University under paleolinguistics, had denied an invitation from the NSA so she could, quote, dig up holes in the jungle. After her trip, she was given an interview, explaining her love for understanding ancient languages, believing them to hold a kind of power, like a skeleton key, as she puts it. She explains further that she was born with a neurological disorder that allows her to recognize patterns differently than other people, making the deciphering of ancient dead languages a far easier endeavor for her. And this would prove to be beneficial to Archer, who had recovered an obelisk from the Colorado incident. The obelisk was littered in ancient hieroglyphs of complete unknown origin, and so by mid-2017, Dr. Cross was hired into the Nightfall program and was sent to their Alaskan research site. She'd immediately be shown the cryptids, a whole ecosystem completely unknown to the rest of the world. And over time, she'd learned that they did not come from the stars, but that they had originated on this very planet, being older than humanity itself. But, to dial it back and quickly explain the Colorado incident, outside the walls of Nightfall, a global conflict was transpiring, with the rising threat of the Federation hijacking a satellite weapon known as the Odin space station. The space station was capable of launching tungsten rods into the depths of the planet before causing large explosions that shifted and shook the very planet. Using the space station, the Federation launched an attack in California, with a stray missile landing in the state of Colorado, creating a deep crater. This incident reawakened the cryptids, as a cryptid colony was beneath the city. The town went dark, and outside of the immense cataclysmic destruction was reports of aliens inhabiting the area. A response team was created and sent into the area. However, the squad was not prepared for what horrors awaited them in the destroyed town, and were quickly overrun. Using the knowledge from their experience, the government established a special drill device capable of destroying the hives before they could regenerate their lost tissue. And so a new response team is made, and once again sent into the demolished town, now with more knowledge and preparation, escorting the drill along the site to destroy all hives in the area, facing off against invading cryptids trying to defend their turf. Arriving at the final hive and destroying it too, the response team places down a nuclear bomb and begins its detonation, hauling ass back to the exfil helicopter. The cryptids try to block their escape, but to no avail. The response team succeed in their escape, watching the town be absorbed by a nuclear explosion, wiping out the cryptid forces. This event caught Archer's attention, and he'd study the movements of the cryptids, noting their behaviors were not that of wild animals, but of direct orders. He knew now that these creatures were obeying something. He just had to find out what, and where. In the rubble of the site was an obelisk, which Archer brought back with him to the Alaskan research site. Finally, back with Nightfall, 3 months into her stay at Nightfall, would Samantha finally be shown why she was actually hired, to decipher the obelisk's unique hieroglyphs. They seemed familiar to her, stating that they reminded her of Akkadian texts or even Mayan glyphs. Cross would research and study the obelisks for nights on end, starving herself of proper sleep, all so she could understand what the obelisk was trying to convey. What she didn't realize is that this obsessive research was exposing her mind to the ancestors' influence. She was being chosen. Over with Archer, he begins interacting with an anonymous individual codenamed Contact 28, who expressed interest in Nightfall's bioweapons research, although he wasn't quite sold on the legitimacy of their work. Archer provided images and videos of their creatures in action, including a large cryptid that they had created themselves, the Breeder. Nightfall's creation, research, and weaponization over the cryptids was purely an end to justify the means. Archer had no hopes of using the cryptids to conquer the world or topple a government. He sought to save the world before threats of global annihilation could even begin to transpire. But his means of accomplishing this were questionable at best. But when his own government, country, and military abandoned him, he had no choice but to rely on more drastic measures. What Archer desires from his contact is an exchange of his research and weapons for a boat and crew that can transport him to an ark. But Archer's plans would have to be put on hold. Dr. Samantha Cross's mind was beginning to grow weak, slowly succumbing to a mimetic virus that was beckoning from the obelisk. The ancestors seemingly possessed her mind, controlling her to release the cryptids that Nightfall had in storage, including the Breeder. The cryptids ravaged through the Alaskan site, tearing apart and feeding off of the fleeing scientists. Despite their desire to do the same to Cross, the ancestors prohibited it. She was to remain safe. When she regained consciousness, she saw the facility was overrun, with everyone being dead. She tried to escape, but the cryptids would just capture her and drag her back into the facility. This song and dance continued several times before she ultimately gave up. The last thing she could do was release a distress signal to the American government, relaying information on Nightfall and of the cryptid outbreak. Archer, aware of the leak, informs his contact that he needs them to provide him his transport now. Contact 28 denies him exfil, as Archer will no longer be able to provide his end of the deal, once again leaving Archer for dead. In response to Samantha's distress signal, the Rapid Reaction Force creates SIF-1, an elite response team keeping the same 4 soldiers that succeeded in the Colorado outbreak. The commander, codenamed Godfather, will be overseeing their operations from here on out. On October 30th, 2017, SIF Team 1 arrives at the Alaskan Nightfall facility, once again destroying a series of hives, while also obtaining any intel they can of Nightfall's research and discoveries, including a bioweapon that launches acidic gas taken by the scorpion subspecies of Crypted. This weapon is called the Venom X. After SIF-1 cleared the facility of its hives, Dr. Cross makes contact through their radios, claiming that if Archer's alive, he'll be coming for her. Traversing further into the facility, SIF-1 finds Dr. Cross in her lab, stating she's deciphered what the obelisk says. Trying to ensure that Archer can't get his hands on the obelisk's knowledge, she tries to end her own life. But Archer quickly renders her unconscious and takes her away. But we'll catch up with Archer in just a moment. SIF-1 leaves the facility and finds the breeder in what I could only presume has become its nest. Fighting against it, and in the incoming waves of cryptids, the strike team managed to defeat the creature. It's worth noting that the spires in the arena are similar to what's seen in the crater in Colorado, so perhaps this area was about to become a cryptid colony if not for SIF-1's interference. With the Nightfall program essentially dissolved, the US military airstrikes the Alaskan facility and sends a task force into their dig site in Mexico to salvage any remaining research. Around this time, the US government also creates the Exodus program, an insurance policy in the likely event of humanity's extinction, designed to send select individuals into space to repopulate the human species and one day return to the Earth to reclaim it. This, of course, is their last resort. Back with David Archer, he continues his conversation with Contact 28, proving he's alive, but providing images of what he plans to provide him, the Ark. Explaining what they are and showing images of the colony he and his crew excavated in Colorado, telling him that if he provides him a ship and crew, he can locate an Ark using Dr. Cross. Contact 28 finally agrees and provides Archer with what he seeks. Provided a ship named the Stormbreaker, Archer and his surviving scientists continue their research on the cryptids, ways to fight against them, and more weapons development. However, one of their scientists, Dr. Kassar, creates a beacon amplifier, a device that can assist in locating other arcs. All it needs is a host, and they luckily have one. Surgically connecting Dr. Cross's brain to the beacon amplifier, they use her mind to locate the nearby arc, located in the Tasman Sea. Through the next several days at sea, Dr. Kassar interrogates Samantha Cross, asking about her involvement in the outbreak in Alaska, what she's learned from the obelisk, and her communication with cryptid overlords. She proves to be mostly unhelpful, holding back on what she says. During their interviews, Dr. Kassar witnesses Samantha's strength growing and her DNA being rewritten into that of cryptid DNA, telling Archer that she may not even be human anymore. While this information is horrifying to Dr. Kassar, this would be relatively good news to Archer, as he believes weaponizing Cross against the cryptids will be key in their species' salvation, like how Perseus wielded Medusa's head, inspiring the Medusa device's creation, going as far as to codename Samantha herself as Medusa. Sometime later, Archer, never intending to fulfill his promise to Contact 28, reaches out to Godfather, negotiating a deal for his return to America in exchange for weapons to defeat the cryptid forces, specifically Medusa. As an incentive, Archer hands over schematics for an in-development weapon, the NX-1 Disruptor. This weapon would not be ready, however, until later in the conflict, as it was missing a central component, a cortex, which I'll explain more later. As they inch closer to the Ark's location, Samantha starts manipulating Archer's dreams, giving him visions of the future. A world layered in skulls, a scorched earth, and the cryptids reigning supreme. Awakening from his nightmare, he checks on Cross, who has alerted the Ark's guardian. Once again, a cryptid outbreak occurs, slaughtering all on board, including Dr. Kassar. The Kraken also begins tearing the ship apart. In quick response, SIF-1 arrives on board to retrieve Cross's head and David Archer, but in order to traverse through the vessel, the strike team must eliminate a series of growing hives. When the strike team locates Dr. Cross, she's protected behind thick layers of glass and a high-security defense protection. In order to gain access to the room, they must trigger the emergency failsafe, releasing a toxic gas into the room. Once they begin the process of leaking the chemicals, waves of cryptids are sent after the strike team to prevent them from killing Dr. Cross. But when Sif-1 managed to release the gas, Cross screamed in her chamber before being torn from place and vanished from thin air. She is sent to the Ark and is given a vision of the future by the ancestors. She stays and waits for Archer's arrival. Before they could leave the sinking vessel, the Guardian of the Ark emerges from the ocean. The Kraken and Sif-1 have an intense battle aboard the ship, fending off increasing waves of cryptids and the Kraken's tentacles. Despite the odds, the strike team defeats the Kraken. Its corpse sank to the bottom of the ocean. Meanwhile, Archer arrives at Baal's Pyramid, the location of the Ark, with a small squad of surviving soldiers. They are ambushed by a pack of cryptids, with Archer getting impaled by a lethal poison. Suddenly, a more aggressive, more awakened Samantha Cross appears before Archer. Believing this to be a dream once again, Samantha proves its reality by severing Archer's arm, saving him from the poison. She demands him to give her a guided tour of the Ark in exchange for her safety and extraction off the island. She'll provide him with the means to defeat the ancestors. Their temporary alliance was anything other than shaky. Archer and his men kept their fingers on the trigger and were ready to eliminate Dr. Cross at any moment, believing her to be part of the cryptid hive mind. Fending off more cryptids and securing a way into the Ark, they find dozens and dozens of sleeping ancestors. And though they were asleep, they were not unconscious, able to see through their hive mind and Dr. Cross. But as of now, they were defenseless, allowing Archer to extract the brain of an ancestor, called the cortex, and insert it into a specially designed organ donor chamber. Samantha explains that the ancestor's brain will be able to perform the Medusa device as Archer desires. However, in the end, Archer still wishes to remove Cross from the equation, but she's grown far more powerful now, freezing Archer in place with only her mind and forcing Archer to turn and shoot his 3 surviving soldiers. As she walks away, she taunts him, having him point the gun down at his own knee and pulling the trigger. He drops to the ground beside the cortex, bleeding out slowly. Sif-1 descends down into Baal's Pyramid in search of the cortex. What they uncover is a whole world existing beneath the surface, a world that belongs to the cryptids, and a grim vision of what their world will soon become. Using a modified drill called a cipher prototype, the device will scan over the obelisks throughout the area, using Cross's research from Nightfall to provide direct translation. Once they translate all the obelisks in the area, they simply destroy the energy provided to them, which opens a gateway to allow them to traverse further down the depths until they eventually arrive at the final 3 spires, which power the gateway to the Ark. Unfortunately for Sif-1 and the human species, the ancestors have already sent their broadcast to every Ark on the planet. Rising above the surface, millions upon millions of cryptids begin to tear apart all of humankind, with the ancestors now fighting alongside them. The Ark the strike team currently resides in is still in slumber, however, but not for much longer. Cross informs them that they must power the cortex using fallen cryptids, and once ready, will need to evac as soon as possible. Archer, still bleeding out, tries to warn the team that she can't be trusted and that she's been exposed, overwritten, blaming the strike team for Cross's survival. Once the cortex is fully charged, the volcano beneath the Ark begins to erupt, with earthquakes occurring across the entire cave system. The strike team escorts the cortex through the depths and back to the entrance, being lifted out and evacuated to California, while Archer releases his last breath. Humanity has officially lost. Billions of casualties occurring rapidly across the globe. Even country leaders have fallen in the mass outbreak of cryptid forces. Godfather takes control of what's left of the United States, and all that remains now is for what's left to take a lesson from their enemy, take sanctuary and somewhere safe until they can one day return to reclaim what's theirs. Bringing us to the final map of Extinction, Exodus. The helicopter escorting Dr. Samantha Cross is hit by a gargoyle, sending the chopper hurtling down to the surface, with Dr. Cross's whereabouts unknown. Believed to have died in the crash, along with the cortex which has become absent along with her. Unfortunately, if they wish to send the Exodus program into the stars, they need to find a way to remove the gargoyle threat, as this subspecies of cryptid is capable of demolishing any aircraft with relative ease, and their key to salvation just disappeared. While other strike teams recover the Cortex from the crash site, SIF-1 is to fend off the invading Cryptid forces and return power to the base's power grid, all the while being under a limited time frame before the Exodus rocket has no choice but to launch. Cortex or no Cortex. SIF-1 explores the remnants of their civilization, reactivating several generators around the base, protecting it from invading Cryptid forces. Once all of the generators were activated, Dr. Cross speaks through their radios just as Godfather was telling them to return to the launch site. She says she's brought the Cortex and doesn't intend on missing her flight. When SIF-1 arrives at the launch site, Dr. Cross informs them that she'll be entering the rocket, and they will not. Entering the Medusa device into the main chamber, she teleports away to the rocket, leaving SIF-1 with one final order. Kill everything. SIF-1 makes their last stand, fending off against every type of cryptid, including the Ancestors. And with the help of the finalized NX-1 disruptor, they destroy the protective bubbles around the Ancestors and bring them down. Despite the odds, SIF-1 succeed. The Exodus rocket begins its launch towards the space station that will protect them, and one large blast of the Medusa device wipes out all of the gargoyles attempting to dismantle the vessel, with the ground forces being eliminated in the general vicinity. SIF-1 amongst the casualties. Though they may have sacrificed their lives, they guaranteed the salvation of what little remained of humankind. Samantha Cross entered a device aboard the vessel, and her eyes shifted to red, leaving the fate of humanity uncertain.
Second rank security officer Adamson reporting. We've located the object emitting the beacon. This isn't how I wanted to make first officer.
Everything you've seen up to this point is just a movie series from the famous director Willard Wyler. But there was still one movie left in the Extinction series, an unreleased soft reboot of the franchise. I hope you weren't a fan of that amazing ending. Because 48 hours after the Exodus's launch into the space station referred to as the Ark, the Cryptid Scourge suddenly died off. That's right, you heard me correctly. 2 days later, the entire cryptid species just died off, and humanity returned to Earth to rebuild their civilizations and repopulate the planet. Samantha Cross stayed aboard the Ark, perhaps believing herself to no longer be part of the human race, or at the very least, a danger to it. She'd travel along the stars, drifting endlessly until she arrived at the moon of an unknown gas giant. The Ark smashed into the planet's surface, embedding itself deep beneath the ice. Dr. Cross died in the crash, but her body was preserved by the freezing temperatures. And then, the Ark started to release a distress signal. By the year 2199, the Zeta Corps would receive the distress signal and send a crew out to the stars to locate the source. Traveling through space for 9 months, eventually locating the moon and finding the remains of the Ark and of Dr. Cross, although the crew knew nothing of the vessel or of Dr. Cross, who was given the codename Eve. Extracting a sample of her DNA, Chief Medical Officer Nick Shen discovers that her DNA isn't even human, despite her physical appearance. Not only that, but her DNA is immensely powerful, showing promise for all kinds of medical research and progress. Meanwhile, the engineering team comes across a database within the Ark, trying to decrypt the files. The two teams begin studying their respective discoveries. By May 13th, Nick Shen brings the team back to the Ark to recover the full corpse of Eve. The unknowns about this Eve dance around in his head non-stop. How did she get here? Who is she? What is she? Are there others like her? He hopes that he can quell these curiosities. A month later, using Samantha's DNA, the crew managed to recreate the cryptids, a species they've never even heard of or seen before, placing the cryptids into storage and research chambers while reporting their discoveries back to Earth. However, the crew have faced some losses during this excursion, and everyone behaving like nothing wrong has occurred, raising toasts and throwing parties over this discovery, has begun to sit the wrong way for some of the crew, such as second-rank security officer Duncan Adamson. The engineering crew finally were able to crack through the files they found in the database, learning about the Ark, the cryptids, and of Dr. Samantha Cross. At the end of July, first-rank security officer Stephen Miller is killed by one of the cryptid specimens, promoting Duncan to his position. What should be a celebration is quite the opposite. Angry and no longer willing to let these things wreak havoc, Duncan begins to put together a group to torch the creatures if Dr. Shen doesn't come to his senses. The same goes for Zeta Corps, who wishes to have the cryptids sent back home. Did nobody teach history? These things nearly wiped humanity out, hello? By August, Duncan's attempts to wipe out the cryptid specimens led to their escape. The cryptids unleashed hell upon the entire installation, killing nearly all of the crew with no mercy. Duncan, Dr. Shen, and a small handful of survivors held out within the base, with hope fading in their hearts. Dr. Shen released the distress signal, but their help would be far, far too late, because by September 2nd, the entire crew had been wiped out. According to Neil, the installation's AI assistant, this is exactly what the Zeta Corporation had hoped for. To quote Neil, "It allows for easier recovery of all facility specimens." And for whatever reason, zombies began to infest the base. That part isn't explained, so maybe it's just from the recreated cryptid DNA, since it's using DNA of a deceased person? I don't know. And that is the entirety of the Extinction storyline. If I manage to get a huge majority of this plot wrong, I will cry, sit in a corner, cry some more, and then take down this video to rewrite all of this. But in the meantime, what are my thoughts? I love the Extinction game mode, storyline, and aesthetics. I think this mode is badass, and it brings me immense pain that this story never got its time to shine. From the trailers, to the intel, to the cutscenes, it is so painfully clear that there was a driving passion behind this project and confidence to boot. The cryptids' designs are honestly so cool looking. I love every single one of them. Genuinely, I think these are some of the most unique and badass looking aliens, and I wish they'd return in some form. Put a scout as a dog skin in a takedown or something. Anyway, I genuinely adore this mode, but sadly, I never had anyone to play it with back then, and even sorta still. Though I did have my brother and my friend help me with the Awakening map, as it was giving me a lot of trouble. So I want to thank them, and I want to thank all of the randoms I matched up with who kinda carried me. I think the mode is great, but I definitely think it's a little overwhelming. I feel the mode is hard to play casually unless you've unlocked all the really good perma upgrades, which will take you forever. I only have 109 teeth as of making this video, and to get the cool Cryptid Slayer ammo I need 500. And that isn't even the most expensive upgrade. The mode is definitely not solo friendly. But, all things considered, this is a really fun game mode with a really cool plot. And it's amazing to me that not only was this their first side mode to feature an intel system, but it even has exclusive cutscenes. Not even Cold War or Black Ops 6 has that. All in all, I wish Extinction got a second chance. But sadly, I know that it never will. Despite this, what does exist is really awesome. And I'm glad I got to go down memory lane again. Anyway, that's it from me. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.
That's it? What a rip!